first.
All right, I hit record. I'm recording it on the cloud.
Okay. We will edit as needed. Have a lovely evening, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to go collapse. I will see you all later. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate all that you're doing here.
Who's the co-host?
Beata is a co-host, and
Me.
I will you need to be made a co-host also, if you would, Jody.
Okay.
Jody is our new communication staff person. Wave, Jody. And Jody's going to be, Jody's acting as the host tonight. So any technical problems, you will reach out to her.
Okay.
And Beata is a co-host along with you at some point. Are you going to make Joe a co-host?
Yeah, I'd just like to have it just in case I need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hover over the more button.
Yep.
Yeah, got it.
Something.
Waitress will co-host the meeting. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is also set up to share. Obviously, you're the only one that can share your screen it's only one at a time. So.
All right, we need to get started. Can we start admitting? Are we all good?
Yep, I'm good.
Yep.
Admit all, and I'm leaving. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Okay. All right, are we ready to rock and roll?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to introduce you first and your title, because we are truly giddy with excitement to have you sharing your wisdom with us tonight, Joe. Joe Goodman is a member of the Temple Israel congregation, and he has graciously agreed to share his erudition with us tonight on the topic of, and this is a topic I think that could not possibly more relevant all the time, but even more so this time of year, called happiness, consumption, and gift giving. Can money, consumption, and gifts buy happiness? And just a little information about Professor Goodman. Joe is an associate professor of marketing at the Ohio State University's Fisher College of Business. His research seeks to understand consumer decision-making in today's marketplace. So we are all looking forward to and very excited to hear what you have to share with us. Welcome as our scholar in residence.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to do this. Will I be able to see other people on this as well, or are we doing this webinar style? I guess I should ask that ahead of time. Because I'm happy to.
I think there's a way for you to have more of a view, possibly not everyone. You might have to kind of scroll up and down. And there are also most likely viewers watching through Facebook Live, which we will not be able to see.
Okay, so so the people that are here as well. Okay, sounds good. Just wanted to check what the format was going to be like. Yeah, if you are joining us, feel free to come onto Zoom. If you're on Facebook, you can do that as well. Because I won't be able to see any questions or comments that you might have from Facebook, unless one of you, Jody or Beta, is going to be, if there's any comments that come in over that channel as well, you can let me know. So kind of before I get started here, I'll just say that kind of the ground rules are that there really aren't any rules. If you have questions as we're going along, feel free to raise your hand or just speak up at any time. And also, like as I said, I'm going to be talking about happiness, consumption, and gift giving. And I should give a special thanks to Celine Malcoach, who's my co-author, also co-parent, wife, and also a professor of marketing at Ohio State University. A lot of the research that I'm going to be talking about, she's a co-author on, but she's also really responsible for, even if she's not a co-author, almost every idea I have or all the research I have and the research that she does as well is talked about over the dinner table and around kids and inspired by her as well. So special thanks to her, and also special thanks to my kids, which are right over there on the corner. Also, when you talk about happiness, and I'll get to it, kids come up a lot. And so they've taught me a lot about happiness as well as my mother and father who have also joined us. So now I feel very nervous. But also I put my kids up there because one thing about happiness is it's really about a big component of it is just about positive emotions, right? And so it's going to be positive emotions minus negative emotions that you have or negative affect that you're experiencing, and then kind of a satisfaction with life. That's kind of what we look at and I'll get to some more details about it. But the one thing about kids is they kind of give you everything, right? They're going to give you positive emotions and some of the negative ones along the way, and some frustrations and some stress and some worries and anxieties. And so they're a really interesting thing to study. Okay, so with that, let's pose a question here. So if there's one thing we like to do in Judaism is to ask a lot of questions. And so I'll be doing that. That's what I've been taught my whole life. So who is happy here and why? So this is a map of some happiness research that's been going on. They've been doing this for decades. And this is just a snapshot of which countries are happier in the last few years on a scale from I think it's 1 to 8, and is the highest that you can score. And you can see there's quite a bit of variance in here in this in the map. So, I can point out a couple of them that are happy. That on the high end, Finland is notorious for being really happy people. Denmark right over here, you can't see the numbers, but these are the Netherlands are going to rank there up there at the highest. My mother is Scandinavian. That's going to be some of the highest happiness ratings in the world. The Swiss, jolly people that they are, and then we can also compare ourselves to the United States at 6.9. 6.9 by itself doesn't really mean much, but it does in relation to, say, hey, our Canadian neighbors, they're 7.3. So they're doing a little bit better than we are in terms of happiness. But do you guys have any ideas or theories or thoughts as to why maybe some countries are doing better? Do you see any patterns or any thoughts that you might have? I mean, we could look at this. If you're going to South America, Venezuela is not doing so hot. So you think twice about that one for many reasons. Oh, I should also point out I had Israel on here is a good one to think about because they're kind of an oasis for many reasons we know, but in terms of happiness, they also are an outlier in the Middle East, much happier than their neighbors.
One theory I've heard is that a lot of times actually they're more secular countries or are happier, like the more highly religious or whatever countries. Well, Israel probably being an exception, of course, but yeah, that's one theory that I've heard a lot.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So religion in general is, or even spirituality and religion is actually correlated with happiness. So people who are tend to be more observant or more religious for various reasons we could get into, but there is that correlation there. But it's an interesting insight that when it comes to countries as a whole, a more secular country seems to be happier. Turkey is one of those that's historically, it's changed over the last 20 years, but historically very secular, even though it's a 99% Muslim country in population, it is a very secularized country. So yeah, that's an interesting thought as well. And one thing that comes with secularism is that it also leads to individual freedom, which is also related here. So if you think about the countries that tend to have the most freedom and equality when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to education equality, and really freedom, individual freedoms, those countries tend to be the happiest as well. Do you guys have any other thoughts, or if you look at this patterns, or unhappy countries? So, we could, what do these have in common? Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Sudan, Yemen, this region, I'll just say that region of Burma where there's some things going on. All right, so those are all countries that are, even Ukraine, right around this region, all struggling with civil wars or conflicts, violent conflicts. And yeah, Trisha, right on, refugees. I mean, it's so bad people want to get out. I mean, that's, if you want to measure happiness by one way would be if people are leaving and leaving all their stuff behind, probably unhappiness. The other thing is, so that predicts a lot of unhappiness, but to really make it to the top, you also have to have, there's some income too. If you look at the wealthier, or actually, well, the flip side, I should say, some outliers, Costa Rica, Thailand, what do they have in common? Those are probably the most peaceful countries in their areas, and they're the happiest. Costa Rica's never really had a big conflict. One of the only countries in Central America to have that. Same thing with Thailand, relatively peaceful, and in their regions. But if we looked at this in terms of GDP or the income of the country, we'll see a lot of happiness. So does money buy happiness? So maybe it's about income and GDP. And GDP is just one way to measure kind of the income of the country as a whole. And if we look at this, so we can look at income or GDP per capita of a country here on this x-axis, and then we can look at happiness, and we can plot out all those countries that I just put up there. And what you see is there's a nice kind of curve right there. You don't have to be great at math or statistics to kind of see that pattern. And as countries make more money, they tend to be happier. Hong Kong's a little bit of an outlier, but you can see that correlation. So that's where the United States is. We can look at where Israel's at, and those are the Scandinavian countries that I was talking about. The Northern Europeans are doing pretty darn well. Okay, so what that suggests is that maybe money can buy happiness. I'm not going to say it can't buy it. Well, it looks like it from a country's perspective, it's doing pretty well. Now we can control for a lot of things in these countries and say, okay, well, GDP is also correlated with freedom. It's also correlated with education. It's also correlated with everything. And you can control for all of that. And you're still going to see a little bit of a relationship between GDP and happiness. Okay. Statistically, but still you might be, okay, I'm a little skeptical. There's not a whole lot of countries. What if we look at individuals? If money buys happiness, then we should see people with higher incomes being happier, right? So here we see income on our x-axis. So people that make more money are over here, people that make less money. And then, and it's, if you notice, it's non-linear, and we do that because income's not really linear, it takes off. There's a lot of outliers out here. And then over here, we have happiness, or the percent, or the percent of people experiencing, say, positive affect, which is positive emotions. And what we see is that as you make more money, okay, your happiness or your positive affect goes up. This one is, I like this, not blue. So not experiencing the blues. As you make more money, you have less blues. Okay, so not really good for blues singers out there. If you make a lot of money, it's not going to be so good. Shout out to my St. Louis people. And then also stress. So if you're stress-free, the more stress-free you are, the happier, or the more income you make, the more stress-free you have. And it kind of makes sense, right? If you're making $20,000 a year and you're trying to support a family on that, just going to the grocery store is pretty darn stressful. And so makes sense, if you have money. Now the caveat to all this is that there's satiation. So in other words, once you hit around $75,000 is kind of what the research has been showing, is it starts to flatten out. So making a little bit more, at that point, we see all these lines start to flatten out. Life evaluation, this is kind of subjective, or your cognitive evaluation of your life in general, that even seems to flatten out once we hit this $75,000 mark, which says that money buys happiness, but up to a point. There's some point where making a little bit more doesn't help out. You may say, well, that's because of taxes or something. Well, no, actually, if we went back to that slide, I would say, taxes, these are the most highly taxed countries in the world. So actually taxes are opposite. The more you tax, actually, the happier people tend to be, but I won't get into what that means. So it seems that income does increase happiness, but then there's a satiation point up to a point. Now that sounds great. Okay, so there is something about money and happiness. It seems like at the individual, but let's look at what our GDP has looked like just in the US over time. Simple graph. Time, GDP's gone up. All right. Basically, that's growth. And you see this little dip right here. That's that 2008, 2009 recession. If we put COVID on here, it's going to be like boop. We're going to see that nice little drop over there. But over time, our country has experienced an amazing growth in GDP and wealth, or especially over the past 70 years. So we should see then more happiness over time, right? We should be happier, these Americans. Oh, wait, but before I though get to that punchline of if we're actually happier, what about individual income? She's like, yeah, GDP's gone up, but I'm not any wealthier than what I was before. Well, what do we see here is, well, if you're in the top 5%, you're doing really well. I mean, the last 50 years has been fantastic to you. Top 20%, you're still doing pretty darn good. That starts to go down though. And in fact, for the bottom 20%, there's been almost no growth in terms of very little. But nonetheless, there's still income growth over the past 50 years. So we should see happiness increase over the past 50 years, right? Everyone's on board? Think so, maybe? Okay, what do we get? Nothing. Happiness over time, if anything, it looks like is going down. And if I were to look at this over the last couple of years, it's definitely not gone back up. If anything, and for me, a middle-aged white man, the picture is not good. I mean, I'm like the poster child for the demographic of unhappiness. And we've seen that, right? In the news and with COVID going on, with job losses, we've seen depression rates go at an all-time high. We're seeing an increase in suicide, especially with middle-aged white men, something that we oftentimes don't want to talk about because it's taboo to really have those discussions, but we need to. So this says that money might not be buying happiness. Quite the opposite, that we've got something amiss. And so this is what's called the Easterland Paradox that has really puzzled researchers for many years. And then the paradox here, right, is that if you look across countries, GDP and money seems to increase happiness. But if you look within individuals, it also seems to increase happiness. But if you look over time as a country, and that it replicates for other countries as well, we're making more money, but we don't seem to be going up. And so actually in the United Kingdom, they said, well, maybe GDP is not the measure that we need to be looking at. And so they established an office, or like a secretary of happiness, or like a happiness office, and said that this needs to be a national priority to really think about happiness, not that GDP is not the measure, income is not the measure. And in fact, inequality seems to be much more important to our happiness than it is just about average income or GDP. Okay, so that's kind of the puzzle that a lot of these things are at. And what then comes is this, we can kind of take a pause here and back up and say, well, what is happiness anyway? What am I talking about? You can't measure happiness. I can kind of see what my dad's thinking. He's like, happiness is it's different for me than it is for you. So how are we even, all this is just gibberish anyway. And that's true. It is. It's different for, well, at least the part that it's different for me and it's different for you and for everyone else. The gibberish part, I would push back a little bit. But when we talk about happiness, first, one thing to think about is that it's consistent over time. So the people that are, if I ask you about how happy you are today, and then tomorrow, and then next year, you're going to be pretty consistent. So that means it has good psychometric properties. It also, the other thing about it is I can ask about happiness in different ways, and I'm also going to get similar answers from you. So it doesn't really matter too much how I answer it. And happiness is also correlated with other things that you would think it would be correlated with. Okay. So if I ask about happiness or a lack of sadness, right, or positive affect or satisfaction with your life, I can do those, and those seem to be correlated, which means that we're tapping into a construct, and that's what psychologists really like to see. The second thing is that happiness, there's two things when we talk about it. Hedonic happiness is which I'll focus on pretty much going forward, but I'll talk a little bit about eudaimonia. And so there's two kind of components to happiness. So you can think about hedonic happiness as this well-being. This is the happy moments that you have. It's more affect or feelings based. It's really just how do you feel right now? It's more short-term and immediate focused. You know, that joy that you get from you know, that I get skiing with my kids, or going on a bike ride, or going to a concert, or on a vacation. The feeling you get right then at that moment at that concert, that's hedonic happiness. Eudaimonia is more this Aristotelian meaningfulness feeling, where that you have a higher, you have a higher purpose in life. And that meeting that higher purpose, having that self-actualization and achieving your goals, that's really how you get to happiness. And it's more cognitive. It's this cognitive evaluation of how my life is. And it's more of this long-term focused and creating meaning over time. We could debate which one we want to talk about or which one's more important. I would say they're both important. They're just kind of different components of what happiness is. Okay. So that's kind of where the research has put it, as these two different types of hedonic and meaningfulness. I don't like eudaimonia because most people don't. That's just a big academic word. When we talk about happiness, one theory that I like that I didn't come up with, but these really bright guys, Deci and Ryan, came up with and have written a lot about, is self-determination theory. And it says that there's kind of three components to happiness, and also motivation. And this model, you might see something similar if you're in education. It's also used in developmental psychology and in developmental tools as well. But it basically says that there's three components. And one of them is autonomy. Having personal control over your life and over your identity is really important to happiness. Do I get to make decisions about who I am? Do I get to have my own identity, or am I forced into it? You can think about gender identity, right? I mean, when people are forced into the wrong gender, we see, you know, massive amounts of depression and suicide, because this is not being met, right? This personal identity, it's such a core piece of your identity too, right? And so that's why it's so important to support people in those situations. The second one is competence. So this, I would say, is more that meaningful, achieving your goals, and maybe a very Jewish value as well, that, you know, being able to learn and self-actualize and find your best. You know, lifetime learning and learning Torah is a core Jewish value that I was always taught. And I think that competence, having competence in your job, having skills, developing skills, are an important part of happiness as well. And in fact, a job, even just having a job, is one of the biggest predictors of happiness, because it epitomizes kind of this competence and also the identity components. The last one is relatedness. And relatedness is just another way of saying social connection. So when we have social connections in our lives, that's really important to our own happiness. We're social beings, and there's other animals that can roam alone and they'll be fine and they'll function. We actually can't function by ourselves. We've all seen, or if you haven't, go see the Tom Hanks movie, where he's on an island alone and he goes crazy. I mean, that's what's going to happen, because we're social beings. We can do it for a little bit. And our kids rely on that as well. And that's a big part of their development. So all those are key components to happiness, and a happy life. The last part I'll put in here, this is my own like kind of addition to this, is self-esteem. and if you grew up in the 80s like I did and went to school, self-esteem was a big part of education. And so that I think is also a component. It's been related. Roy Baumeister, who's done a lot of research on self-esteem in the 90s, shows that feeling good about yourself is kind of the starting point to happiness. Now, you might say self-esteem is part of autonomy and competence and these other components, but I just think it's kind of important to call that out as well, that building self-esteem. Now, you can go too far. Having too much confidence can get you in trouble as well, but that's important. Okay, so now that's my like little blurb on happiness. So what does money relate? How does money relate to happiness? And oftentimes when we think about money and spending, we think about materialism. And materialism is the importance consumers attach to acquiring and owning a material possession. So that's your academic definition here. And for me, I don't know why, maybe it's because I grew up in the 80s, Madonna song plays in my head about a material girl. Because the boy with the cold hard cash is always Mr. Right, because we're living in a material world. I won't sing this for you, but you can probably hear it. I am a material girl. Only boys who save their pennies make my rainy day. So she's kind of admitting that this is the world that we're living in. And that world has been shown to have some negative consequences to happiness, is probably not too surprising. But what's been found is that people who focus and purchase material possessions oftentimes are more lonely than other people. So people who are higher on this materialism trait tend to rate themselves as lonelier and have less happiness. Part of that is there's this cycle. So we don't know, though, if it's the materialism that's leading to it, or if it could be actually the loneliness and the unhappiness and materialism is just an outcome of being sad, right? So we don't want to say that it's kind of hard to parse those apart, but I'll get to that. And there might be some evidence to say that material possessions and a focus on that might be driving it. But part of it, you can think about the cycle, is that when you buy stuff, we adapt to it. So you get that high. Right now, if you get kids with Hanukkah, or maybe yourself with Hanukkah, you got all excited, you got a new gift a couple of days ago, and now you're up, and now you're back down, right? And so we adapt really quickly to positive feelings. And then we feel lonely again. COVID doesn't help with that. So then we want mood repair. So then we go out and we shop some retail therapy. And by doing that, we're just focusing and purchasing more material goods, and the cycle continues. All right, so that's what's meant by that. This is also kind of similar to the Hedonic Treadmill, which you might be familiar with. There's a great article in the New York Times a couple of weeks back by the story of Philip Brickman, who is a positive psychologist at Cornell, who came up with a Hedonic Treadmill and sadly committed suicide in the 80s. And he was just an amazing researcher. He was at Michigan before that, and kind of a star in this positive psychology movement. And the idea of the Hedonic Treadmill is that you just we're kind of running on that hamster wheel. You buy stuff, you feel good, you get the buzz, just like a drug, and you adapt to that situation, and then you need more of it, and then you need to buy more, and you need to buy more. And just like a drug can be an addiction, or a food can be an addiction, or I suppose exercise can even be, to some people, to some extent, we're kind of stuck on that treadmill, that keeping up with the Joneses type of mentality. Right. So there's a lot of evidence that money can maybe be part of that negative side. We're focusing on money, we're buying more stuff, and it's leading to more of these negative outcomes. So in my research, we looked at this recently, actually with working with a doctoral student who's at Cornell, and we came up with this idea that, when you ask other people will admit that they're materialistic, but for the most part, people think, well, I'm not very materialistic. It's everyone else that's the problem, right? And so he said, let's dig into that a little bit. So we asked participants in the lab to rate themselves and others on the material value scale. So the material value scale is like 9 or 12 questions that's asked people things like, the things I own say a lot about how well I'm doing in life, or my purchases, acquiring material goods is very important to me. I feel like I don't have all the things that I want to have in life, or the purchases. Okay. And so we can rate people, we can take all that, average it, and kind of see where you fall on the spectrum of this material value scale. We took those same people, and we also said, hey, why don't just rate you, rate other people as well. So most other people think the things they own say a lot about how well they're doing in life. Okay. So most other people, how do you think other people think about material goods? You know, how important is this for other people? And so what we found is that, well, first, people on average rated themselves about a 3.1, let's say. But it doesn't really say too much about it. It's just, you know, an average. But what's interesting is that when people rate other people, they rate them significantly higher. Like, no, but you're materialistic. You have a problem, right? So that kind of got us thinking as well that there's something about materialism and happiness, and then also about how we predict about other people's happiness as well. Okay, so and this relates back to a paper that the first paper that I published on this that got me into the happiness research to begin with one of my advisors at Texas, Julie Irwin, and a doctoral student there at the time, Leonardo Nicolai, who is probably one of the happiest, is one of the happiest outgoing guys that I know. And so in our study, what we did is we followed up on these studies that looked at material goods versus experiences. And we asked people to recall a recent purchase under $300. That's in this study. There are multiple studies that we've ran. And we randomly assigned people to either material goods or to an experience condition. So we said, recall a recent purchase under 300 that's a material good, a material purchase. And then for other people, we said, recall a purchase that's an experience. And we defined what we mean by material good or experience. And we said, you know, an experience is something that you can't touch. And you purchased it. It's a moment in time, and you purchased it with the intention of acquiring an experience, which is whereas a material good is something that you can hold and keep. We then asked people to rate their happiness about those purchases. So we said, how much did this purchase contribute to your happiness in life? When you think about this purchase, how happy does it make you? And to get an idea of which purchases are going to make you happier. And then we went back to that material value scale. You remember that I had before, and asked people to say, hey, how much does this rate yourself in terms of material values? So what we found is that we can look at people and kind of group them into two buckets. Now we did this continuous. So this is really a continuum over here where there's, you know, on average, people are right around here. And then this is two standard deviations, one standard deviation below and one standard deviation above of material values. So you can kind of think about this as a distribution. For those people that are lower in material values, we found that experiences led to significantly more happiness than purchasing material goods. Okay. Which was actually consistent with previous research. So there had been one other study that had been done by Van Boven and Tom Gilovich, also at Cornell, that had shown this same effect. But what we found was that it was moderated by material values. So for people with low material values, there's a big effect, and for people with high material values, the effect is small, and even times it goes away at some point. Suggesting, and you can also see that they're just lower. They're a little bit less happy overall with their purchases, but having that material focus might be inhibiting you from having the happiness from even an experiential good, an experiential type purchase. Now in this research also, we found that experiences really consistently lead to more happiness than material goods. But there are some caveats as well. So when things turn out negatively, like experiences aren't always the best way to go. And there's some differences. Okay. Now, I should say we've replicated this over and over and over again. We've done a meta-analysis that's just coming out with, I think, 141 studies from all researchers all over the world. And we put it all together, and what we found is that this effect still holds. Experiences lead over and over. Experiences lead to more happiness than material goods. There's some examples of when it doesn't, and when it does not. Yeah. So a good example. So like I always use. I probably should have put some examples of what I mean by experience or material good. But like maybe you're thinking about buying a new couch or going on vacation. Now, right now, going on vacation probably wins out because you're like, I'm so ready for that to happen. But that's an important trade-off, right? And so like, well, the couch will last for 10, 15 years. That seems like it'll be more lasting. A vacation's only a week. Well, it turns out the vacation consistently leads to more happiness. But it could even be something simple like going to a concert versus buying new clothes. Jewelry is a material good. A bicycle can be a material good. Going on a bike ride could be an experience. So there are some gray areas. Food is one of those kind of gray areas where sometimes food or going out to dinner can be an experience, but it also can be a material thing as well. And so once you start to get to that kind of middle ground there, where material and experiential blend, we see exactly what you'd expect. They're right in between material and experiential type of purchases. And it also matters how you think about it, and I'll get to that. But if you think of your purchase as an experience, then it tends to be more experiential and lead to more happiness. Okay, which brings me to my next point. So thinking about acquiring experiences. So experiences contribute more to happiness than material goods. And like I said, we've replicated this over and over again. I've actually have a recent paper as well that shows that just getting people to think about the purchases that they've already made, having them think about those purchases in experiential ways can increase their happiness. So just reflecting on, and I put a bicycle up here because I think a bike is a great example of one where you can think about having the bike. Did you just buy it because you wanted to have it? Or did you get it because you wanted to have an experience with your family and go on bike rides that you couldn't before? That type of experience, and you're actually using it, that's going to lead to much more happiness than if you buy things just for the possession and acquiring a material good type of reason. Now, the reason for this, what we found is that it's due to slower adaptation. There's actually multiple reasons why thinking about experiences leads to more happiness, and one of them is slower adaptation. So that happiness that I was talking about, you go buy something, you get that positive feeling. With material goods, it wears off faster. Experiences, it tends to wear off much slower. Even though we're done with the vacation, it's still, for weeks and months afterwards, still has positive effects on our happiness. The other big reason I talked about how humans and social connections are important in that relatedness construct. Experiences do that. Most of the time, experiences are with other people, right? We go on bike rides oftentimes. You can go by yourself, and that's great. And that's an important thing too. But you can go with other people too. You can go to concerts alone, but most of the time you go with other people, or there's at least other people at that event. And so experiences also have this component that they build social connections. As I said, we've replicated this across 141 studies in a big meta-analysis. So it's a really consistent effect as well. Now, there's some exceptions. I should kind of pause and say, not all experiences all the time. So my wife got a promotion at work, and we were having this discussion, and she said, I feel like I need to buy something to kind of mark this occasion. Maybe I should go buy a piece of jewelry or something so I can remember it. I need some new earrings. I said, Celine, haven't you read my research? If you're just joining us, my wife is a co-author and also an academic, and this is a normal conversation in our house. So have you not read, my research that shows that experiences lead to more? She said, nope, this is an exception. I want to go buy some jewelry. And so like we solve many of our disputes. We go to the lab and run some experiments and try to get some data. and some empirical evidence about who's right. Turns out I was wrong. So material goods we found were good for marking special occasions and special life events. So bar mitzvah, great time to, I have a Kiddush cup up here. I still have my Kiddush cup every Friday night. Get out my Kiddush cup. I got it from the synagogue, gave it to me. I remember my bar mitzvah. I pull out my siddur from my bar mitzvah. It's right there. Those things are bringing me back to that special life event. And so material goods are really good at marking those events. And those are experiences too. So think about it. It's actually a material good to mark an experience. I don't know if you can see this actually. I have a prop, but this is always here. That is my bar mitzvah invitation. I mean, how many people can you remember your bar and bat mitzvah gifts? Well, I think the Krolofs gave me that, and I still have it, and it's in my office, and I just think it's the most fantastic gift to give. They just framed. It seems so simple. They just framed my invitation, but it brings me back, and it remembers that accomplishment, and it lasts a long time, which is a good component of a gift as well. So I have wedding rings. That's why we give wedding rings up here as well. A tallis would be another thing as well. The other thing is material goods can facilitate experiences. So that's that bicycle example. So if you're buying a bike because you want it, or buying skis, or maybe this is just me trying to justify buying new skis so that I can have experiences with my son because he loves to ski and we love to ski together. But material goods can facilitate that experience. And so if you're buying material goods to facilitate an experience, there's evidence as well that can lead to more happiness. At least it's better than, ones that don't have an experiential component. Okay. All right. So we've been talking a lot about buying for ourselves. It's Hanukkah. It's the season of giving. And everything I said about experiences, you might be thinking, well, what about gifts here? Material gifts are okay, right? Because we give a lot of material gifts. We couldn't be getting this all wrong, right? I mean, there's got to be something. So in a paper that we had a few years ago, we asked people, we said, well, for the holidays, how many experiential gifts and how many material gifts are you giving? And we gave them a definition. We said, material gifts are ones that you can hold and you can keep, and experiences are things that you live through and events and you can't touch. And on the holidays, 80% of gifts were material. Birthdays, I think it was like 70% or 65. So it's still pretty high. So we said, okay, well, maybe people are getting this wrong. Let's see if that same effect holds for gift giving. And so we asked people to recall a gift for the holidays that you've given or received. So half the people we said, think about a gift you gave. Half the people we said, think about a gift that you received. And we did this in December, right around the holidays, right after the holidays. Actually, I think it was right after Christmas. And then we split them again. We said half the people think of a material gift or think about an experiential gift that you might have received. And as you'd expect, it was a little bit harder for people to get to think of a material or experiential gift. Experiential gifts were a little bit harder to think of, but people did. There was a lot of people that did. And then we asked the receivers, people who received the gift, if they were in that group, we said, how happy does it make you? How happy does that gift give you? That same happiness measure that we had from the previous study. We said, how happy does it make you? And the givers, that group, we did the same thing. We said, how happy, but we asked them, how happy does it make the recipient? So estimate the people who are receiving the gifts. How happy do you think it made them? Okay. Now you'd think I should be able, if I gave a gift to my kid or to my spouse or to my dad, I should have some idea of how much happiness and be able to predict that pretty well, right? What did we find? Well, for receivers, so people who are receiving the gifts and they're saying, hey, how happy did that gift make you? Experiences led to more happiness than material gifts did. Okay, so we replicated that same finding that experiences lead to more happiness than material gifts or than material goods. And it's for gift giving too. So the moral of the story, give experiential gifts. Now, what did the givers say? So the people that were giving the gifts, did they think that their experiences were leading to more happiness? No. They didn't. So we're mispredicting. We're getting it wrong. We think that people want material gifts, or that experiences are not going to be any but better. So what do? We give material gifts. And that's what we've done before. That seems to be the social norm. Most gifts are already material, so we give material gifts, not knowing that experiences are actually going to lead to more happiness and gift giving than material gifts. Or maybe we're just trying to optimize our own happiness and not really thinking about the other one. There's a lot of things. And in the paper, we talk about why people have this discrepancy, and a lot of it's risk, and experiences are hard to give, and there's reasons, and try to pick that apart from a marketing perspective. But the big takeaway is that, hey, we're kind of getting this wrong, and we should be giving more experiences than material goods. So if we think about giving to increase happiness, one takeaway here is, if you want to increase recipient happiness when you're giving a gift, give experiences. And I apologize. I should have done this last week, right before Hanukkah, as we were doing all this. In my family, we also celebrate New Year's as a really big holiday in Turkish culture, and my wife's Turkish. And so to us, it's like right in the heart of gift giving. We just have Hanukkah, we got New Year's that's coming up. If you listen real carefully, you might even be able to hear my daughter right now. So give experiences, but it's the same thing when it comes to birthdays and other holidays as well. And experiential gifts, there's some great research that shows that part of the reason is that experiential gifts enhance the social connections that people have. And by giving those experiential gifts, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. So I got, for my gift one year, we were out in California visiting my sister, and my wife for my birthday gave me deep sea fishing. And it was an amazing. And I was actually just talking with my dad about this, and we looked at a picture. We're like, oh, that's when we went deep sea fishing out in Newport Beach. That was amazing. Such a great trip. And like, everyone pitched in for it. And so it wasn't, if I went by myself, it probably wouldn't have been that much fun. But it was because that gift, usually when, if you give a concert ticket, you go to the concert, you go to the theater, or you go to a play, or to go see Hamilton, you're going to go with other people. You're probably not going to go alone. And so that's the part of that social connection. The other thing, other research has shown about gift giving is that money is actually a lot less important than we think. And that it really is the thought that counts. So when people say that doesn't mean that you can spend nothing or a couple of dollars on someone's wedding and say, hey, I thought it was the thought that counts. So there's some social norms, there's some boundaries in which you need to do. In fact, you can spend too much money. If you spend too much money, then the other person feels like they need to reciprocate, and then that is a bad gift. So there's some boundaries of what you need to do it, but less isn't always more here. Unique gifts, thoughtful gifts are better than spending more. So the gifts that people rate as leading to more happiness and being better gifts are the ones that feel unique, and that somebody put some thought into the gift, like literally the thought. And you say, oh, no, it's the thought that counts. Well, clearly you didn't think about it. So you have to do that. The other thing is re-gifting is okay. Really cool study found that people don't re-gift because they think it's going to be offensive. And it turns out the givers are like, no, if you want to re-gift it, that's fine. It's yours. It's actually not as bad. So we think, great Seinfeld episode though, based on re-gifting anyway, nonetheless. The other thing that's probably the most important here is that giving increases your own happiness. Now, we should give to other people and give tzedakah because it's the right thing to do, but it also will increase your own happiness. And so in this paper, Dunn, Acton, and Norton, in their science paper, what they did is they randomly went up to people, I think it was in Boston, and they just gave them $5. They said, we're going to give you this $5, but there's one caveat. You have to spend it in the way that we're going to tell you have to follow. And they said, okay. And we're going to call you the next day and ask you a question. Okay. All right. And half the people, they said, you spend the $5 on yourself, go buy something. And the other half, they said, go spend that $5 on someone else and then go give it to them. They called them the next day. The people who had spent the $5 on someone else were happier than the people who spent it on themselves. So gift giving makes others happy, makes us happy, makes the whole world happy. kumbaya, right? So I highly encourage that. And once again, I think this is an example of Judaism kind of getting it right? I mean, tzedakah, about giving, tikkun olam, repairing the world, is about giving and doing the right thing, and not just to increase your own happiness. Of course, you do it because it's the right thing to do. Also, how we've talked about money all this time, but we could also think about how we spend our time and how it affects happiness. Now, I won't get into this because Celine is probably going to be talking about this in a couple of months. I think in February when she does her talk, and that's really her area of expertise that she spent most of her career studying. But the short of it is that we have a time famine, and that most of us are time scarce more than we are money scarce. And if you're in that situation, buying time-saving purchases and not material goods actually can lead to more happiness. So paying someone to clean or to shop or to cook for you will likely lead to more happiness than, say, to freeing up time instead of acquiring more stuff. Now, it depends on the person. I love to cook, actually. So to me, and I've gotten really into making challah and baking. This is not really probably healthy for me right now, but it's enjoyable and it's kind of soothing, and I like doing it with my kids. And I'm a marketing professor, so I actually don't mind shopping, especially in grocery stores, because it's like a little lab where I don't necessarily buy. I just kind of watch people and watch things and marketing and things. So to me, those things might be enjoyable, or maybe they're enjoyable to you. But the point is that freeing up time often is going to lead to more happiness than buying more things. Okay, so what about kids? So for kids, and when I mean kids, like really less than 10 years old, material goods seem to be leading to more happiness. So it's kind of bad news for kids, I suppose, or maybe it's good news or just good to know. And the reason for that in this research, and this is a recent paper by Lance Chaplin, who's at UIC, is that it's kind of due to memory and theory of mind. So when you give a material good to a small kid, their memory is not really developed yet or when you give them an experiential good, I'm sorry, their memory is not quite developed enough to put that into memory and to remember all the details and all the social connections that come along with it. So the things that makes us as adults happy with experiences don't always translate to kids. And also it's because of theory of mind, which is the ability to see and understand other people's perspectives and how happy they are. And so when I go, fishing with my dad, that is building that connection that's so important and leads to a lot of happiness to me. But kids aren't quite seeing that yet. They haven't developed it. And that's just kind of who we are and how we're programmed. And now, saying that, I still try to give our kids experiences, but we try to give them a little bit of a token along with it. So like if you're saying, hey, I'm going to go on a vacation and as a Hanukkah present or for their birthday, or we're going to go to a play or do something like that, buy some sort of material thing so the kid can help remember it, to help with the memory facilitation as well. So there's ways to kind of help with the memory part. And we try to teach them as well that it's not about the material things and about acquiring things, about the experiences. But I think there's also, we have a spending problem, I would say, in America, and not just a material values problem. We probably have the material values problem too. But we're oftentimes, and this isn't really my idea, again, I give credit to Celine, where spending requires self-control. And that's difficult. And it's especially difficult for kids and teenagers, right? They see something and they want it. And it's just, I want it and that's it. And we say, no, you need to learn the value of money. Money doesn't grow on trees, And so you need to work for it. And that's how we teach kids the value of money. And that's great. But that's only half the equation. We're only focusing on the earning and the revenue side. And we're not focusing on the demand side. We're not focusing on how to spend money. And so what I try to, and actually, again, this is really, my wife came up with this idea, is that we also should be teaching kids how to spend, not just earn money. So let kids practice spending, saving, and giving, and then they can learn through making trade-offs and learning the consequences of what happens when they blow the money on something dumb and it breaks and they go, oh, okay, that was hard. So we actually do give our kids a couple of dollars every week that is unconditional. It's not like they have to earn it, way before they even know how to earn it, because they don't even know what the value is of it. I mean, my 5-year-old, she's just, to her, it's the same as Monopoly money, literally. I mean, we play Monopoly. I'm like, she doesn't know the value of it. So that's what she's trying to figure out right now, kind of how that money works different than this money. And we have two different piggy banks, and they put a little bit. They have to put half of it into tzedakah for giving, and then they can do whatever they want with the other half of it. And sometimes they blow it on stupid stuff, and sometimes they save it. And one time someone knocked on the door, I think it was someone from Bexley Schools, one of the high schoolers was doing a charity and said, hey, I'm raising money, blah, blah, blah. My son opened the door, said, oh, I got some, ran upstairs, grabbed his tzedakah, and even grabbed more. I think he gave him like $20. You know, it was like way more than I thought. He was super generous, and he was just so happy to do it. And it was, you know, it's kind of learning how that works in that trade-off. It's kind of a neat experience. So I should say that theory is not tested. Everything I've talked about today is has empirical evidence. That one is just a working theory with two subjects in the experiment. So not scientific, but some future research that I'm hoping to think about. The last thing I'll talk about is something, again, new to me, but this has actually been shown in research for a long time. Barbara Fredrickson, who's at UNC, a psychologist there, has done work on meditation that shows that meditation increases positive emotions, and it also increases social connections and happiness and meaningfulness. And they've even come up with this type of meditation called loving kindness meditation that's been shown to increase happiness. And I also just want to give a shout out to at Temple Israel on 10 a.m. on Saturdays with Or Mars. He leads a meditation session for Shabbat, and there's really no experience necessary. I just started. I mean, I'm new at this. I didn't know anything about it. I'm horrible at it, but you know, I'm there, and I've always wanted to do it, and I finally, you know, just sat down and did it. And literally, that's how it works. And it's kind of been a bright spot of my week to just sit down and relax, shut down my mind. I'm an academic, so I think a lot, and so I got to do for my job, and not do the talking like I've been doing this whole time, which is way too much talking. So I encourage you to check that out. Nice plug. All right, so just a few more minutes here. Wrap things up. Some takeaways. The first one is the Hanukkah advantage. Is what my wife and I like to call it, whereas this to avoid this Christmas after effect. Again, a good example of Judaism kind of figuring this out, that, you know, there's slower adaptation with Hanukkah. We get little gifts here and there, and they're kind of spread out over the week. Whereas in Christmas, you get them all in one day, you have this big rush, a big buzz, and then the next day it's, the letdown from it being over. So it's good to spread out gifts. It's good and also it's good to have small gifts at first and kind of work your way up. If you start with the big one, then everything else is going to seem smaller. So again, I apologize. I should have had this discussion with you all last week, but write it down, take a note, think about it next year. I talked about spending time wisely, buy time. Celine will talk more about time, unplanned leisure time, and how we spend it with others. Third part, think about experiences. So when I mean by that, think about your purchases, even if you're buying material things like a bicycle, think about it in experiential ways. And really do consider, hey, do I really want this, or would I be happier with buying an experience on going on a trip? Or if traveling makes you anxious, and I don't encourage traveling right now, of course, then you could think about other experiences like going on a hike, or going on a bike ride, going on a walk. When we get back into theaters and concerts, we need to support, local arts for sure. They're struggling so much. And there's charities that you can give to support those. So definitely think about your purchases in ways that you can spend, I think, in experiential ways. And a lot of them, the thing is a lot of them aren't expensive. They don't cost any money. Fourth one here, giving. Of course, giving tzedakah, repairing the world are important concepts in Judaism. And, of course, it's great to give to synagogue, but you can give to any organization. And giving, it's going to make you feel happier and as well. So it'll have that nice side effect to it as well. Also, giving gratitude and giving thanks increases happiness, which I think giving is a big component of. My theory here, working theory of teach spending, not just earning. Remember, there's two sides of that, how we earn the money and then how we spend the money, the inflows and outflows for the accountants in the room to think about that. Maybe you have 3 different piggy banks for your kids, spending, saving, and giving, to build those mental accounts for them. And then the last one is really to this idea of meditation. And thanks to Jody for putting up that link there on Zoom to join Temple Israel's Jewish meditation on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So with that, if you have questions, I'll be hanging around. You can email me. You can come on to Zoom and ask the questions, or post them on some sort of social media place that I might check. If you want to learn more, here's some great books to think about. The Myth of Happiness. Sonia Lyubomirsky is at UC Riverside, who's done a lot also about like happiness from kids and family. Happy Money. I cited some of the studies that they talk about, and Mike Norton and Elizabeth Dunn have done about how spending leads to happiness. Dan Gilbert at Harvard, formerly of the University of Texas, my alma mater. Hook 'em horns about this idea that we stumble upon happiness and then we can't really navigate because we can't predict our future selves and what's going to make my future self happy. So how am I going to invest now? And this last one, James Wallman's is a journalist who's talked about, we got too much stuff, man. We just need to have more experiences and get away from the stuff. So with that, thank you for sticking around, listen to me.
Thank you, Joe.
And if you guys have any questions, let me know.
What a truly fascinating topic. I think you've given us a whole lot of dinner table conversation fodder, as well as a lot to think about. This has been truly enlightening. We really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us. If anyone wants to contact Joe and doesn't remember how, just feel free to contact me or anyone at Temple Israel. We can pass along all messages, emails, information. Trisha, that was a message. If anyone wants to stick around right now and have a quick little info session or question session with Joe.
Just let me know. Great. Well, thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for being our guest. I'm looking forward to your wife, who you gave an amazing shout out and preview to as well. So thank you so much to you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.